Welcome into the second episode of the Dedicated Podcast, and Jonathan Mumphrey, Ben Spicer here. Right out of the gates, we've got a very special guest joining us here on the podcast. You heard our story on the first episode, but we're excited to share the story of someone who is in Oklahoma and college football lore and just football lore in general. Charles Thompson, as well as his two sons who have came up and been Division I quarterbacks. You might know of the Thompsons of Oklahoma as well as of Texas, and now back at Oklahoma, your youngest son, Casey Thompson. But we're excited to have you and talk a little bit about your story and your background. And Jonathan, I know you've gotten the chance to know Charles over the years, but you found out some things that you might not know about him here and doing some research, getting ready for this episode.
Absolutely, Ben, and thank you. We're super excited about our second episode and to have football glory, college football glory on our second episode is pretty stoked. I'm gonna just jump right in. Coach Thompson, man, you and I have been talking. We built a relationship over the last several years, and I just did not know that I was talking to college football glory. So I apologize for that. So I'm gonna apologize off the bat. But before we get in that, one thing about the Dedicated Podcast that we want to be able to shed a little bit more light on. Who's the man? Where the man come from? What was that moment in your childhood? What was that moment in your early days, way before high school ball, way before college ball, that kind of triggered you to dedicate yourself to being successful? Can you kind of? I know we're digging in and jumping in, but we got a lot of information I want to cover.
For me,
talk to us about that.
For me, guys, it's kind of a twofold answer for you. I grew up in Fort Smith, Arkansas originally. And in Arkansas, the sport of choice for all my relatives was boxing and basketball. Mm-hmm. And so we grew up in the project there in Fort Smith. And, I only remember at a very young age being around my own relatives or my own people most of the time. And I wasn't the best athlete. And when I say that, I'll remember from this aspect. I was younger. I had other cousins and other relatives who were better than I was. So as we walked around the neighborhoods and in the streets, I didn't look at myself as some, great athlete. I looked at myself trying to live up to my cousins or trying to be as good as this one or trying to be as fast as that one or trying to be as strong as this one, trying to flip off the diving board as well as this one or swim. All these sort of things was a daily challenge for me when I was walking around the streets there in Fort Smith, Arkansas, around 8 or 9 cousins of mine who were all good athletes. And so that was kind of a challenge to me at a very young age living there. So we then moved Fort Chaffee. My mom met a soldier, then moved to Fort Seal, which is in Lawton. Mm-hmm. And that's what took me to Oklahoma. When I got to Oklahoma, I began to be around an environment that all of a sudden, hey, I am the fastest kid in the neighborhood. I can outrun this guy. I can run circles around. And so I started learning at a very young age that, number one, that I had some very talented relatives and cousins. And number two, that, that I could run, jump, and do more things than most other kids at a very young age. But here's the thing that motivated me more throughout my entire life than anything, Jonathan, is I was small. Mm-hmm. Even coming out of I remember, going into high school and I used to ride my bicycle in the summer up to the high school, challenging and telling my high school coach that, hey, I'm dedicated. I'm going to be your starting quarterback in my first year in high school. I'm willing to ride my bike up. And back then, you guys know the difference. Yeah. We rode our bikes. 10 miles wasn't nothing.
Ben might not know it, but you and I know that.
No, I know.
You know what I'm saying? And so it wasn't nothing for me to ride my bike all the way in the summertime. And here I couldn't even lift. Remember, I couldn't lift 135 pounds on the bench press.
Correct.
And I'm sitting there talking to all these upperclassmen and all my coaches, telling them, yeah, I'm gonna be the starting quarterback. I'm gonna be the starting quarterback. And I remember them laughing at me. And I remember telling one of my centers, who was a guy named Randy Missouri, I looked at him, I said, I'm going to play for University of Oklahoma someday. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget the guy looked at me. And the first thing he said, number one, nah, man, you got to be good. And you ain't that good. and Jonathan, guys, I took that personal because I was a small guy. And if you guys don't remember, back then, most quarterbacks that were in the National Football League were throwing quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
You had the Randall Cunninghams and a few guys that were runners, but mostly everybody was throwers. If you were a guy who could move, they automatically made you a running back. And I started out my football career as a running back.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was always, I kind of always had this little chip on my shoulder, guys,
Mm-hmm.
that I was going to be what I told you I was going to be, that I was going to do what I said I was going to do. And that was, I was going to be going down that ramp and someday wearing that Crimson and Cream and the OUC on this hat I was going to have on the side of my helmet, playing in the Cotton Bowl, throwing oranges out for the right to go play for the national championship against Nebraska and Lincoln. So those were my dreams. And so I at a very young age, I said, to get where I got to get, no matter my size, every time I put on the pads, every time they turn on the tape, or every time I got on that football field, it was a challenge and my duty to show everybody who was that dude. And that was my practice every day.
College football's changed so much, and we're going to talk about that coming up. Just the offensive styles, just how offenses evolved in general, and how you see quarterbacks throwing the ball so much more. But one of the biggest changes in college football, I think, from now to then is probably recruiting and just the process, and how much goes behind it. All the hat flipping and everything like that on signing day. You might not have had that until recently. Especially wasn't blown up as much as it was back then. So, you mentioned you wanted to go to Oklahoma from the jump. I'm kind of curious what that initial contact with Coach Switzer or maybe Oklahoma's coaches was like for you when they initially reached out and, said they were interested in you coming and being a Sooner.
I'll tell you something funny. This is a great story. So the very first time I met Coach Barry Switzer, and you got to remember, I grew up Lawton's about 70 miles from Norman, Oklahoma, 80 miles. And so my first OU football game, of course, my sister was a little older than me, and she played in the band at Oklahoma. And so my first football game I went to at OU was OU versus Nebraska when they had the three horsemen, Turner, Urban Fry, and Mike was here in Nebraska. Spencer Tiller was the running back. So I didn't get a chance to meet Switch on that deal. But I later, as I got older, became a break dancer. And we had a very talented group, ended up being one of the best groups in the state of Oklahoma. And we had won a contest at a radio station in Oklahoma City. And I don't know how Coach Switzer had found out about it. And so he invited our group to come dance for the team before they played Texas one year. And so here I was, a 11th grade, I think 10th or 11th grade kid in high school. And we went up and danced for the OU football team. And Coach Barry Switzer looked and said, "Hey, you're that quarterback down there in Lawton, Oklahoma, Charles Thompson." He said, "I'm going to be down recruiting you." And so that's really kind of one of my first initial contacts with the University of Oklahoma was through my ability to break dance, kind of an odd deal there. And so I ended up coming back to my senior year. I never forget this. First time Coach Switcher's at a football game. And back then there was a lot of strict rules and you really couldn't talk to people or coaches directly a lot. There was a lot of dead time more than it was live time. And I was at this game in Norman, Oklahoma. We was playing Norman High, and Coach Switzer, and their field was set up where you got the track, and he's walking around instead of being in the stands. He can't talk to me, but he's between the stands and on the track where everyone in the facility knew he was there, including myself. And I'm nervous, guys, my first half, and it's kind of raining a little bit. And I'm playing bad, losing. And so as we're walking in the locker room, I'm pretty upset. I'm thinking, man, Coach Switzer finally come and watch me play. And I'm having this horrible half. And we're walking in the locker room, and Coach Switzer had made his way by the locker room, and he's looking straight ahead, not at me. And he's got his hands up on his chest, and he's got his foot up on the wall, not because you're not supposed to talk to recruits. And he says out loud, "Come on, Charlie Thompson, show me why I came here to watch you play. Show me why you think you need to be quarterback for the University of Oklahoma." I went in that locker room, guys, and when I came out, I told all my teammates, I don't care what happens the rest of this game, but y'all best believe I'm about to put on a show you ain't never seen before. Ended up scoring 4 touchdowns in a half. One was 76-yard run. When I got done, I looked over there, and Coach Switzer was gone. And I thought, man, I did it too late. He didn't see it. Well, little did I know, the next day, Bobby Proctor called me on the phone, and they say, son, I'm going to tell you what you did. You got you an offer to be a quarterback or a scholarship athlete at the University of Oklahoma. Switzer was so impressed with how you cut across the grain in the rain. He said, that guy right there has got to be a quarterback for me. And that's kind of how it went down.
Wow. So that was your junior year. That's super exciting. So I know you moved from Fort Smith, Arkansas to Lawton, Coach. Mm-hmm. How was that transition in life? I mean, I know for me, some things triggered different for me in my life, but how was that transition?
It was originally, I'll be honest with you guys, it was a tough transition. Like I said, I grew up in Fort Smith, Arkansas, which Arkansas at the time, I don't know if it was entirely, but my world is all I can tell you is what I remember. Mm-hmm. It was a segregated environment.
Correct.
I remember only hanging around, Jonathan and guys, my own kind. Correct. I remember walking in neighborhoods and our parents would tell us, our aunts and my uncles would say, y'all got to walk in 5. You can't walk by yourself. And when we were outside the neighborhood, we stuck together. Listen, when I was in Fort Smith, when I ran into a person not my color, the reaction wasn't hello. The reaction was, what y'all ready to do? That's kind of how it was. And when I moved to Lawton, quite naturally, my mom moved me into predominantly an all-white neighborhood. And so my first initial adjustment to Lawton was very tough. I got into a lot of fights. I initially got kicked out of school a little bit. Heck, I'm not even proud to tell you. I was so enamored by these basketball uniforms. They had this shed outside. Me and another little buddy of mine broke into the shed to get the shorts. And I wasn't smart enough to realize it. I actually wore them to school when they were trying to figure out who broke into them. And I was against the party wearing them inside the school. And that's just kind of and so it took an adjustment. But, I tell, my mom has since has passed away. And I tell her, moving to Lawton was perhaps one of the best things that happened to me because at a very young age, it taught me to be the person I am today, which is I feel like a person who has the ability to adjust with any type of race, any type of individual. I no longer look at color at all. I look at people. And I think that was in part the me moving to Lawton and experiencing just being in a multicultural environment at a very young age, which was different than what I experienced when I was in Arkansas.
You talk about the transition from Arkansas to Oklahoma. What about the transition from high school to college for you? I know going from high school to college, especially playing quarterback, that's probably not an easy transition. And especially at Oklahoma in the late 1980s and, all the winning and championships that they had accomplished under Coach Switzer. What was the pressure like and the spotlight like on you, as you were starting to get out there and in the game of the century against Nebraska and in all those big moments, playing Miami in the Orange Bowl? Just what were the internal pressures like for you?
Let me answer this as well as in 2-part because I'll answer it as going into college. So in 1985, Oklahoma won the national championship with a young freshman named Jamel Holloway. Here I was a senior in high school. And when I first got to Oklahoma, there really wasn't a for sure locked in position for me. They recruited me as a quarterback, but they also had me as a defensive back and a punt returner. And so my first initial practices on campus, and back then you didn't report in June. You reported a week before the upperclassmen reported, and you had a week to practice with all the freshmen, and then all the varsity guys that came in. And so we got 1 week of special treatment, and then the next week I was sent to the back of the bus basically. And I always teach kids about the one thing you got to adjust from any level you go to for the most part. Everybody's can tolerate it, and when you're in the front of the bus and everybody's patting you on the back and you're part of the game plan. But what about when you're in the back and the coach is not looking at you, he's looking through you, and he's really talking to somebody else about the game plan. And so for me, my entire life, I've been that guy. I've been that guy who was expected to lead the team. And then when I got to the University of Oklahoma, man, I went from being a superstar to a 4th-string quarterback who wasn't even traveling for road games. I remember, guys, here I was 100. Now, I got to OU weighing 155 pounds, okay? And I remember My first year, I was redshirted. And so back then, red shirts, they didn't allow to go on trips. I stayed behind. And I'm walking around campus. And this is one of the things that one of the most humbling, but yet inspiring situations that happened to me. I'm walking around campus, and a young lady walks up to me, and she says, well, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Lawton. She goes, what made you what come to Oklahoma? And I said, well, I'm here on a football scholarship. And she literally looked me in the face. She says, you're not on scholarship. I just saw them playing on national TV. If you're a football player, why are you here? I'll never forget how it felt. And honestly, the rest of the year, when the team went out of town on road trips, I went home because I was so embarrassed for people to see me on campus. Because now they didn't know. You got to realize, I was 155 pounds soaking wet at 5'9". I didn't look like your typical football player. But what they didn't know I had was speed, and people don't see speed until they actually see you running.
Correct.
And so that was the toughest period for me when you say the transition from high school to college. Man, that redshirt year was probably one of the most mentally tough years that I've ever experienced in my entire life. Then once you get to the point where you're playing, I'll never forget the day that I was named the starter for the University of Oklahoma. It was a game that obviously Jamel Holloway, we both was playing my next year, and he was the starter. I was the backup. And then, you always dream. You dreamed of it. I dreamed of it since I was 6 years old. I said, I'm going to be starting quarterback for OU. I'm going to be starting quarterback for OU. And we were in this Oklahoma State football game, and Jamel turns the corner and looks like he goes down with an injury. And I'll never forget, I go in for a series, and I come back, and I'm on the sideline, and they actually show one of the highlights. I'm on the headset. And I'll never forget Coach Jim Donner, who was my offense coordinator. He says, well, you got what you always wanted. And I said, what, to play? He goes, no, it's your show now. And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, Jamel's out for the rest of the year. He tore his ACL. And now you're the starting quarterback for the #1 team in the nation. What are you going to do about it now? You've cried to me in my office all year about you deserve to play, you're better than him. Now go out and show it and prove it. It's your show now. And I'll never forget that on that sideline after that conversation, I literally froze up for about 15 seconds because you can't imagine the years of dreaming of this, the years of visualizing it. And then here it was right in front of my eyes. I was living it. I'm the starting quarterback for the University of Oklahoma. My next week, I started for Missouri, against Missouri. We were scheduled to beat them by 50 points in my first start. And we barely won 17-14. And I played horrendous again. I'll never forget, we're walking and preparing to play Nebraska the next week. And this at the time, we had been ranked #1 all year and Nebraska #2. That was with Jamel Holloway. I started my next week and we barely won. Without losing, they dropped us from #1 to #2 and made Nebraska #1 because everybody had predicted #1. We thought it was a 50-50 shot Oklahoma could beat Nebraska in Lincoln with Jamel. We know they have no chance with this young freshman, Charles Thompson. By looking at the performance last week, no doubt about it, Nebraska's rolling. They're going on to play for the national championship. And that all week fueled me. And that pressure of thinking back at 6 years old in my living room, watching Lincoln, watching Nebraska and Oklahoma, and the winner got to throw oranges to go play for the national championship. I'd seen that in my living room on my TV 6, 7, 8, 9. Every Thanksgiving Thursday, I was in front of my TV watching this game that I'm now a part of, and they tabbed it as a game of the century too. And so for me, it's probably the most memorable game that I could probably tell you I played as an athlete, but certainly the most memorable game that I played in that crimson and cream uniform was walking into Lincoln, Nebraska, when nobody thought we could do it, and guiding the Sooners to a Big 8 championship and beating who's now my good friend Steve Taylor in the Nebraska Cornhuskers.
That's super exciting. So kind of share with after that. I mean, you're the man at that point. How did life change after you? What was the changing moments in life? Because now you're a hero. That I bet she'd walk up on campus. She knew who you was after that point. So,
well, I'll tell you how bad it got to me. Yeah, I'll tell you. the fun part about all that is, you get so full of yourself, and that's kind of where it went. Being the starting quarterback for the University of Oklahoma, not that it isn't a big deal now, but back in the oil boom, that was the mid '80s. It was a big deal. Things were blooming. I ended up going to classes in fur coats, because that's how we were treated. It was like, and I ended up, my ex-wife now, I met her in the classroom that I showed up 2 weeks late. After the teacher said that she wasn't allowed any more students, I showed up 2 weeks after that in a fur coat, walked into class. The teacher let me in the classroom. I saw a pretty little girl sitting at the desk, and I walked behind the guy and told him, "Hey, man, let me get that seat." And I started blowing in the hair of my then, who I wanted to be my girlfriend, who ended up being the mother of my kids. And we spent 18 years in marriage together. But that's how it turned out. I was able to, it was almost like, I don't know, it's like being, an NFL player, because that's how they treated us in the Oklahoma at that time.
So they was dropping the bags back then in the other side of the locker room. I know I heard some, playing at SMU, I came in at the second class after the death penalty, and Terrence Mann would come and ride the bus with us, and he'd tell us all the great stories of how they would, T-Man, they would have the hook on their hands hooked on the locker, and then when they come back, it's on the floor, and they reach in the right pocket, and it's a roll of hundreds. So you didn't have a couple of them pants fall off the hook, did you?
Hey, it's funny. Hey, Jonathan, SMU was one of my top 3 schools.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. God, what was the quarterback name that you back then? But anyway, they ended up being one of my top 3 schools. But the year that I came out is when they issued the death penalty.
Yes.
So they weren't going to be able to go to the bowl, and so that's why I dropped them. But I was very, very interested in SMU because they ran the style of offense that I could go in and be successful with. They liked running quarterbacks, versatile quarterbacks like that, and so they were one of the ones that I was really interested in. But no, I can tell you tons of stories about, you be at practice and you smell the cigars in the air.
Yeah. And
you'd automatically know,
that's the man.
The big wigs are in the tunnel, baby. You know what I'm saying? And so we called them, they didn't allow them in the locker room. We had the $100 roll handshakes. Yeah. We were walking by going to the locker room. Yeah. And those things really happened. We had, it was, but I wouldn't change my life in time. I would change some of the decisions I made. Yeah. But I wouldn't change the experience in the time that I had at the University of Oklahoma. It was an enjoyable time for me as a player.
I bet that was enjoyable. I came in the second class back after the death penalty, and it's like they didn't even want us to be there because of what the football team did. So I can imagine, T-Man and Jerry Ball, Terrence Mann and Craig James and all those guys at SMU, their lifestyle. They taught us studies about how the payroll was. So I can imagine the fun and, just enjoying the game of football at that time. So I kind of missed that window, but it was great to be a part of a great school. So.
No, I can understand that. And that's the thing, for me, like I said, at 6, I watched my first OU football game on a black and white TV in my living room. Back then, Jonathan, we didn't have TVs in every room.
Correct.
And so my mom raised, 6 of us in a household, and we kind of make sort of a list as to who could watch what at one given time on TVs. And so I'd always put down the time slots because Oklahoma was one of the schools that played on national TV every Saturday. So whatever time they played, I always write in there. And man, you guys, I don't know that I can really describe it. I've tried to many, many times. The emotions of having a dream at 6 years old, and then being able to fulfill that dream at 18. I watched one of my first quarterbacks was Slot. He wore the number 6 and had the bandana. And then when I got to Oklahoma, they couldn't give me number 1, which is what I wanted because the other quarterback in front of me who had more seniority had number 1. And they said, "Is there any other number you would want?" And I immediately said, "Who has number 6?" because that was the first OU quarterback that I fell in love with. And his name was Thomas Lawton. And so I wore the number 6. And listen, I can't tell you what it felt like. Just those Saturday afternoons there in the Cotton Bowl and playing in the OU Texas game, or being a part of the Big 8 championship, battling Nebraska for the right to go play for the Orange Bowl. Man, I could tell you thousands of nights that I slept and I visioned, I dreamed, and I hoped and I wished, and then to be able to fulfill that. It was just it's like walking on cloud 9. It was a dream that I can't imagine.
Once you got to that and you got to experience that, and you're playing in those big games, you're on national TV, and those moments that you envision, what was it like after that? We talked about the build up to high school senior to college freshman, and then becoming the starting quarterback. But what was life like beyond that? Once you kind of got settled in and it was your show and you were winning games and you were proving people wrong?
That's when the wheels sort of began to come off. You begin to live in if you're an 18-year-old kid, 19-year-old kid who came from a little bit of a nothing background, and all of a sudden you're given sort of the keys to be the face. You're walking around campus and, man, everybody's patting you on the back. Professors are liking you. You can't walk in any restaurant in the city or the town without everyone knowing and offering you this or that. And man, it's almost like putting you on a pedestal. In fact, this is what I thought of myself, guys. I was given a 300ZX, and on the front of the 300ZX, it had a vanity tag that said King Charles VI. Wow. And that's kind of how I thought. I mean, I felt like I was royalty. I feel like it was, and so you began to get the big head a little bit. You begin to think that kind of rules don't apply, or you're above law, and you begin to live this style of a lifestyle that I don't know that you ever really even imagined for yourself, and you just sort of get out of control, and things sort of get amuck a little bit, and you end up finding yourself in situations like I found myself in.
Yeah. So kind of elaborate there, Coach. I mean, that was one of the situations, the things. Because we got these kids today, they're getting all the money. They earn the NIL deals. And one of the major moments you saying King Charles VI, and we'll talk about 6 because that was my number in college too. So that's what I'm in this period. But King Charles, that means, I can only imagine you walking into anywhere and you can get whatever you want, every meal, every clothes, every girl, anything you want. Nobody says no to King Charles. And I see these athletes today with these NIL deals. Some of these guys are getting 1.5 million, 2 million, and they never played a down. 800,000, 700,000. And I'm glad for them. Don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. But do you think, that was part of nobody being there to say, hey, calm it down?
Oh, absolutely.
Kind of took you into your downfall at that point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I was raised by a single mom, and man, she did a great job, for us and helping us get and doing things. So I'm not one that says, it's a parent's fault. It's an individual choice of what they do with their own life.
I agree.
But I didn't have that strong male guidance that I needed through most at the critical times of my life, and this happened to be one of them. There was nobody that gave me the blueprint, guys, to how to handle it, how to be prepared for it, what it was going to be like. It was completely, and I mean utterly, completely overwhelming. Yeah. The amount of success, the notoriety, the privileges that I was given at 18, 19 years old. My mom moved to Dallas, and my dad, who was a retired police officer, lived in Lawton. But I had gotten so self-centered that I disconnected from all that guidance because I felt like I had all the answers. I'm the one that got me here. I'm the one scoring the touchdowns. I'm the one doing this. I don't want to hear what nobody else got to say. I don't need to listen to my stepmom or my dad. I can pay my own bills. I got money. I got this. Do you need some money? Kind of a deal. And so that's, Jonathan, guys, the similarities of what I know some of these NIL kids are going through right now. in that. And so, man, the only thing I would say is you got to stay well grounded, man. You got to stay focused on the vision and the dream that you set out. Man, I wanted to be a football player, and certainly I wanted to make money, but I really cared more about the football and the love of the football and the desire to be known as the best more than I did about the money. All that money kind of got me sidetracked. All that notoriety and all that fame, all that pat on the back and turning the other cheek and doing everything. I tell people this: you can think you're winning because what you're getting away with may not be done. It may be done in the dark, maybe done behind closed doors. But at some point, you do ultimately pay the price for all the decisions that you make. For me, unfortunately, it came bearing down at a young age of 19 when I got involved with a group of friends that taught me into getting involved into a few drug deals. Conversations, really. I ultimately convicted and at a very young age didn't have, this is how ignorant I was. I always thought to get convicted for selling drugs, you had to sell them. I didn't know you could get evicted for talking about selling them.
Wow.
You know, I didn't understand conspiracy. I didn't know what that was. You watch TV back then, it was you do something, you get caught. You didn't tell me if you're a part of the conversation that's talking about doing it, you can get in trouble for that. I never really understood that until ultimately I was faced with it in my own face. And it was kind of like at that point, it's like being in a pool where you can't control the water going over your nose. It's out of control now.
Right. And I think for me, you know, as I learned that part, and I think you took responsibility.
Yeah.
You didn't point the finger and say, hey, my mom was a single mom. I didn't have this and I didn't have that. You say, hey, look, I did do what I did. I know this. You know, and you took responsibility for that and what I read. Do you think that I know it looks bad sometimes when we go through those challenges, but do you think that helped you to rededicate your life to become the Charles Thompson you are today and the great the athletes and the kids that you raised, the man you are today? Do you think that moment was that next level change for you?
Listen, I believe that God only puts on people what they can bear. And I think he knew he made me tough enough, strong enough to deal with what I dealt with. Listen, I went from being a hero to a zero, number 6 to an inmate known by a certain number. Not a bunch of people in stands rearing my name, but you know, judge said I was going to spend the next 17 months of my life in a federal institution. At 19 years old, you know, I really can't explain to you guys, 19, 20 years old, like what that felt like, losing. I worked all my life and doing all my life to accomplish those things. And then to have them taken away was the most humbling thing that I ever went through. And without a doubt, it's funny. I did a deal a couple of years ago on halftime of the OU Texas game with Chris Fowler, who interviewed me, guys, while I was incarcerated. Mm-hmm. And they showed the clipping. And one of the questions he asked me, what would I do and what would I tell my sons if I ever had sons at some point? And it played that. And I told him exactly what I'm saying now, that at the end of the day, you can think you're getting away with something. But you have to keep your eyes focused on and learn to be accountable, but also learn to be accountable to yourself. That if you have a vision and you're having a dream, don't get so engulfed in those vision and dream that you overlook your disciplines that help you achieve and to obtain the opportunities to make those dreams come true. And that's what I lost sight of. And that's what I tell and have told my 3 sons throughout their lives and career. I made it a conscious effort to be the father figure continuously in their life, so that they would, in hopes that they wouldn't make the same decisions and choices that I made, because I was going to be in their ear telling them. I wasn't a parent that hid behind the fact my kids knew about me being incarcerated. I said, listen, we're here in the state of Oklahoma. You're going to have kids that have parents. They're going to be talking about Charles Thompson, the football player who got arrested. We're going to cover Sports Illustrated. We're going to address it and deal with it right now. It's not about who you were. It's about who you are. And this is who I am now. And so I dove back into this community. I didn't run. A lot of people ask me, why'd you come back to Oklahoma when you could have went anywhere else? I came back to Oklahoma because this is where I knew that God wanted me to be to make the biggest difference. And so 25 years later, I've been running a youth nonprofit organization, 25-acre tackle football facility. And, you know, Jonathan, you and I met doing what I felt like my calling is, and that's giving back to young athletes. It's not about winning and losing. It's about the educational piece, about what life gives you and what football gives you to help you prepare for life, and how being dedicated through those processes of understanding what it takes to be a great football player is the same things that it takes to be a great father, a great businessman, a great salesperson, a great husband, all the above. You have to have those types of elements in that football teaches you. It's not over till it's over. My life is an example of that. If you look at the beginning, it has one portion. You look at the middle, it has another. You look at the turmoil I went to OU, there's another. But now look at me as the man. It talks about the different quarters. It's not over till it's over. And we see many football games, basketball games, that we thought when we turned the TV off, oh, that team lost. You turn on the TV next morning to find out they came back and won. Yeah. And that's what I was determined to do in my life. Some people turn the TV off, but the story wasn't over with. Turn it back on. Because now at 56, here's who I am.
I kind of want to circle back around a little bit because you mentioned staying in Oklahoma. But after your release, you did get to play football again up at Central State University at HBCU in Wilberforce, Ohio. I'm from Ohio, so I just wanted to kind of include that. But I wanted to talk about your journey then and getting the chance to return to football. And then what was life sort of like after football? And how did you realize your calling of wanting to coach and wanting to mold young athletes?
Well, I was fortunate. It was funny. So my roots in Fort Smith, Arkansas, there was a coach who had coached at Central State here in Oklahoma, who had knew me when I was at Oklahoma, but also knew my family back in Arkansas. He was a coach at Central State in Ohio, Wilberforce. He called me up, and I just got released, and I had some schools that were looking at me and wanted me to come back and try to play quarterback, but I was steadfast on, man, I'm an option quarterback. At very best, they turned those guys into something else in the pros anyway. So when I got back to college football and decided to go that route, I wanted to play every position but quarterback. And so I was only looking for schools that would allow me to come play running back or something different. So Central State allowed me to come there. I had a connection with the coach. They had a great history of putting guys still in the NFL, even though they were in high school. In fact, Eric Williams, who was a Dallas Cowboy, came from there. Vince Buck, Hugh Douglas. There were a lot of guys who had came from that school, and so they had a very good track record. And so I decided to go to Central State to play running back, and we ended up 2 years later winning the NAIA National Championship. Me as one of the leading rushers, I had over 1,300 yards rushing. And so I got an opportunity to go into the combine and was supposed to get drafted, didn't get drafted. Obviously, my past came behind me. So I had a lot of teams that wanted me to come in free agent wise, and I decided to go for a guaranteed contract in the Canadian Football League. So I played there for 2 years, and then ended up going into the NFL Europe, and was one of the leading rushers behind Saran Stacy, who came from Alabama in that league, and ended up tearing my shoulder up like third or fourth game of that season, and went back the next year, and then decided I had my oldest son, Kendall, who was probably about 6 or 7 at the time. I decided to hang up. You know, I could have went back Canadian Football League, but I just felt like that it was time for me to do something different. So rather than continue to chase a dream, I decided to be that father to my oldest son, Kendall, and be there. If I couldn't be there to teach him how to be the best athlete and take him through the turmoils, the ups and downs of what it's like, what life's going to give you, that was my calling. I felt so with him. I came back, and then I looked up one day, and a lot of parents came to me. I had some equipment in my garage one day that led for me coaching. Then a bunch of people came to me one year. I think I did that a year, and said, "Man, we want to move and start a football league." And I was like, "Well, you guys should." And they were like, "Well, we need somebody to kind of be the spokesman." And I was like, "I don't know if I want to do that." And so they needed someone to put together a PowerPoint presentation. At the time, I was in sales. I did that. And so they coerced me into being the guy presenting it, and they ended up, lo and behold, we were trying to pitch to get this sports complex through the city of Oklahoma City, and I went and did the presentation, not thinking we'd have a chance on it. We responded to an RFP, and by God, we got it a month later. That was in 1999, and I've been doing it ever since.
I love it. I love it, Coach. And I love the evolution for you and becoming a coach as well, coaching your two sons that went on to play Division I college football. I kind of want to talk about them a little bit and, what it was like coaching them as they grew up. And because it's interesting for me, I was talking to Jonathan. We were kind of going over our notes over this. And, I'm a big stats nerd. I'm a stats guy. So I was kind of looking at your college stats and, your total number of passes in your career. Obviously, you guys ran the option, but it's just interesting to me now, helping out Casey and your all's organization doing 7-on-7. Like, did you fathom that would be possible back then? Was 7-on-7 like a thing you guys did in practice? I mean, you guys were an option team. So just how crazy is it to see and, be a part of the evolution of football, especially at the college level in terms of how often the ball gets thrown now?
I'll tell you how that happened. So when I went to Wilberforce, Central State, Ohio, my coach was Coach William Billy Joe, who coached under Dick Vermeil. And he ran a pro-style offense. Mm-hmm. And so that offense, not the wishbone, is what I founded my youth football organization on. Nice. That offense, the pro-style. And it was funny because I kind of knew at a very young age that for both of my kids, actually it was Kendall first, I said, if you're going to play quarterback, you got to learn how to throw. Yeah. And so I started working on and understanding how, because I was an option quarterback. We didn't throw very 8 times a game. But I'm good at attention to detail. So I started researching and looking at and talking to people, different philosophy, different this and that. And so I started having him throw it when he was 7. We started running the no huddle offense, the spread offenses. I taught him the tree route. Obviously, I learned that from Coach William Billy Joe's offense, who ran the Philadelphia Eagles. He was part of that offense back then in pro. And so I taught my kids. Everyone always thought when I started coaching, we ran an option. I never ran the option for the wishbone. I ran the power I, and we used the pro style, the early on pro style system, because I knew that was the way of the future. And I told everyone, if you're going to play quarterback moving forward, you now will have to learn how to throw the football. And so I started getting my kids involved. When they started playing football and they decided they wanted to be a quarterback, they had to learn how to throw the football first before I could teach them the option.
How about has it been watching their journey over the years? We'll start with Kendall. I know he went to Oklahoma as well, but your youngest, Casey, now, I know he started out at Texas. Now he's found his way back to Oklahoma. So how do you feel about that? How did it feel seeing him playing at Nebraska and Texas? And did you have any, Nebraska, Texas hats in your collection, or how did you kind of go about that?
Well, Kendall was my firstborn. And listen, it was to tell you that it was a dream and felt unimaginable me playing for Oklahoma, but to have your firstborn do the same thing, it's just hard to describe that. And so that in itself was a joy to watch Kendall go through his journeys, both at Oklahoma, then transferring to Utah, then hurting his knee. He won the starting job there against Oregon and Marcus Mariota, then coming back and only playing receiver for one game, end up signing a contract in the National Football League to be a receiver with now the Commanders, and then which when McVay went over to the Rams, he and Ike Hilliard took him over to the Rams with him, and to see that success for him was just unbelievable as well. It's another story of you never say never. Never thought a kid who had never played receiver in his entire life, who only had one pass thrown at his entire college career, only played one game at that position, ultimately signed and spent on 2 seasons in the NFL as a wide receiver. And then to have Casey come along. Listen, it was weird because what we went through with Kendall being around here in Oklahoma was a little bit tough. Following my footsteps for him was tough, that pressure. And so with Casey, we decided we wasn't going to put any pressure on him. If he wanted to go, we took the colors of schools away. We went for situations and opportunities, and we created a matrix. And ironically, when it was all said and done, Texas was a school that was the top of that with Herman and what he had done before at Ohio State and Houston, using the black quarterback in the way he wanted to use it. Texas being a football traditional powerhouse, which is one of Casey's heavy criteria. And then just the rich tradition of being at Texas. And I got exposed to it in a different fashion. It was different. I'll be quite honest with you guys. I've grown up my entire life very disliking the Texas Longhorns.
Yes, and you did.
It was certainly a different type of 3 years. Listen, I never actually wore the burnt orange, but I did have some Longhorn, stuff but I never actually wore the burnt orange. I wore the white and the black, but never the burnt orange. And listen, it was easier when Casey was the backup quarterback. I still rooted for Oklahoma, period. The 1 year that he started against Oklahoma was the most difficult, and I don't even know how to explain it to you guys. It's hard to describe my thought. Like, I don't know how to watch that game without rooting against Texas. And for the first time in my life, I was sitting there in the stands in turmoil. Just hard to know what to root, and Casey had a great game. He threw for 388 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. Unfortunately, ended up losing the game. So to some degree, a lot of my OU fans say, well, you got the best of both worlds because your son played unbelievable, but OU still won. I said, at the end of the day, it was probably the one game only in my life that I wanted. I wish Texas had won because, obviously it set a different path for him losing that game. And then ultimately, the situation ultimately led for him, transferring out of Texas. I think if you win that game at Oklahoma, now they're 6 and whatever. They go to a bowl, and now the dynamics of Steve Sarkisian first year is not, hey, get rid of everything that you had before and replace it. It's more, let's improve on it and see if we can get better at it. And so that was kind of the mixed emotion of that. So it was difficult. And then to have him transferred to Nebraska, I mean, you can't write this stuff, guys. I played in Oklahoma, and my number 2 rivals was Texas and Nebraska.
Right.
Oklahoma State was number 3, but those were number 2. And to sit there and tell you, I had to sit in the stands and watch games where I was on the opposite side of that.
Yeah.
You just can't describe that. You can't make that stuff up.
Yeah, I can only imagine, man. I mean, I would have been there, just love my kid, but you're so loyal to your brand. That was a very tough moment. But the great thing about it, Coach, and coming back to your building the youth league and the youth organization, Casey, you guys won the crown. I mean, I remember talking to you in Oklahoma, and this year you was there in Broken Arrow, and you said, "Mom, we coming to the crown." And I was like, "Great." And I told people before that, I said, "Man, if Hustle, I think they coming in to redeem themselves because they lost there in Oklahoma. I think they coming."
Oh man.
I just saw that energy, and so it was exciting to be a part of that. So, kind of tell us a little bit more about Hustle and kind of how that whole program started, what all it does. Give us a little bit more in depth about now. It's kind of, Kendall is out of football. He's been a dad. I can only imagine. Casey is kind of in his last journey through Oklahoma. How that transition is going for him, and I tell you, some of my most impressive coaching I've seen is when I saw him in Oklahoma and I saw him at the Crown. I was standing by him. I was like very impressed with his IQ and how he called the game. A lot of people don't understand the power of the select 7-on-7 that's happening now. You've been an ex-athlete who's seen it for the past 25 years through quarterback eyes. Kind of give us your viewpoint on that and kind of talk about your organization a little bit.
Well, so let me explain a little bit of the history of Hustle. So Tony Ballard, who's in Atlanta, very good friend of mine, and we began to do camps together through FPU and some other branches. And man, we just hit it off unbelievable. This has maybe been 10, 15 years ago. And of course, you guys know he has Hustle Inc. in Atlanta. So it's really originally his organization, and I'm just an extension of that. So when I decided I wanted to get involved in 7-on-7. It kind of came about. We were in San Antonio together doing a camp there, and I was noticing a lot of the kids that were part of the Army All-American game at the time. They kept giving credit to 7-on-7, and I looked up and I was coaching a group of quarterbacks, guys. And out of that group of quarterbacks, I didn't see no Oklahoma kids. And so I looked at Tony and I said, man, I got to do something about that. I just don't feel right about that. And so I asked him if I could adopt his hustle name and start a branch in Oklahoma. And that's how I started Hustling 405, was an extension of him. And, you know, Tony was very delicate about who allowed, but we were so close that he allowed me to do it. And I was honored. And I could have chose any name, but I really respect Tony and how he does things. And he's the only kid, the only person I've actually ever let train my son Casey, you know, at the time. So I trusted him that much. And so that's how the organization started. And for years we struggled, you know. I remember the first year that I started and I came to the Tulsa event and you were running there in Tulsa and we got ran out the place my first year. And I told him, I said, in order to get somewhere, sometimes you got to take your lumps. I said, as an organization, let's remember this day. And, you know, we came this year, as you mentioned, in the Tulsa event, and we lost in triple overtime to a very good team. But we had been doing that, and I don't know what it was, guys, but listen, Casey has a way and a commitment about him. He's 100. I mean, when I tell you he's more than 100% a football person, that's all he knows. He lives, eats, and sleeps it. And he adopted philosophy with this group. We're not gonna accept the standard is the standard. We're not gonna accept anything less than that. Here's what it takes to be successful in college. So if you're gonna be part of Hustling 405, you got to make Zoom calls. You got to make walkthroughs. You got to make this. You can't just know the plays by looking on the sheet. You got to know the plays by drawing them. He made every player draw and understand spacing, understand yardage, understand the concept, everything else. And he was adamant about it. And I remember everything that I do is about being prepared for something futuristic. I'm not just here to play the game. I don't want to just. And so we adopted a philosophy. In case you was right, the standard was the standard. It was about getting you prepared for the next level. It wasn't about just winning an event. It was about putting all the processes and the pieces together. And so if we do that correctly, this is the result we'll get. And Jonathan, we had preached it, kept coming up short. You witnessed it in Oklahoma, but we were right there. We knew we were right there.
Yeah.
And we went to the Crown, and I don't know what happened. I'll tell you what happened. So Casey says, I'm not going to coach another game unless you agree to have. We had a guy that was doing our games, and we would put the drone up, but sometimes he wouldn't. You know, he didn't make it or wouldn't do it. So I had to go buy my own drone because Casey refused to coach another game without having film. He says, this is how you raised me, how you taught me. And the other gentleman, Quentin Lewis and Casey, were teammates. I coached them both since they were 7 years old.
Right.
Casey was now running my offense and my defense. So Jonathan, that Saturday we had pool play. We went back to our Airbnb, had all the parents over, the cleans over, and we watched film from that Saturday afternoon and broke down and made the adjustments. And that's ultimately how we got over the hump. We went back and relied on the process, the standard that Casey had mentioned, that we're going to be able to go fast. We need to go fast. And everybody understood the spacing, the depth of the route had to be a certain way. And man, I'll be honest with you, man, it just, you know, it all came together at the right time. Listen, I don't know that I can tell you that I could duplicate it again. But what I can tell you, I experienced it on that weekend. It was like lightning striking in a bottle. The best that I've ever felt in anything that I've coached was the joy. I won a national championship with Casey and this other little gentleman at Little League football. I never thought that we would have a chance to do what we did. And I give all the credit to those two, and particularly what Casey was able to do on that offense side of the ball was just magical. I think we went 8-0. We led all offenses in points scored. And Jonathan, I got that ring, baby.
Got that ring. It looks good, baby.
That crown and that trophy is sitting in my living room. I think out of all the trophies I've ever been around, just a credit to you, Jonathan, that trophy is the most unique and just authentic and just classiest trophy that I've ever had to be around. I just and I respect you for that, and I respect it. But I tell you, it was a joy and one of the greatest experience as a dad and a mentor and a guy who coached for the experience. What I experienced on that Sunday at your event was one of the highlights of my entire life, certainly.
I thank you. That's an honor, man. That's an honor to the team and the people that work so hard with us as a group, being in the team that these guys have. But man, I mean, it's just super, super exciting to see you guys complete that. I was standing there and it was going back and forth that I could see Casey. I just got his way and he was in a zone. But what I saw there, I saw discipline and communication. And I saw those kids, they knew exactly what he wanted. And I'm not sure if you want to speak on that point there, but I'll pass it over to you and kind of take it from there.
Well, and that goes back to what you guys don't realize when I talk about, you hear a colleges going through walkthrough. Casey would literally take those guys literally, and I'm talking about on air, and he would walk through every particular situation down to the science. He never lost his composure. Listen, in case you're wondering, guys, he's been coached by Tom Herman, Tim Beck, Mike Yurcik, Steve Sarkisian, Mark Whipple, who was obviously in the NFL, Charlie Fry. I mean, he's had some of the greatest minds. Fedora was also there with him. He's had some great offensive-minded guys, and the offense that we're running is a collaboration of all those guys. He put together his own offensive book, and I tell people right now, I can turn on Texas's. There's a few plays that we run that Texas run that they ran and helped them get to where they were this past year. Wow. Now, here's why he knew it better than me. Guys, he's ran it. Yes. Practice after practice after practice after practice for years, and he knows the depth of it. He knows the reads. He knows what to tell the quarterbacks. Your eyes got to be here on this step. Your eyes got to be there. I mean, he knew every integral part about it, and he has an innate knack to teach the details. It's one thing you guys know to be able to run it and do it yourself, but to teach it to others takes a certain type of a skill set in the craft, and he's blessed with that.
Yeah, and definitely to teach it to kids that maybe not be others that are not at your level and talent. I think that is key.
Yes. So I'm proud of that for him. I'm proud of that experience. Him and Quindon did an outstanding job. I really became more like the overseer. Yeah. They ran the defense. Quindon ran the defense. Casey ran the offense. And I just made critical decisions here and there. And that was really it. It was the easiest but most difficult coaching job I've ever done. And I mean, I'll be honest with you. Those guys did their thing, man. And like I said, Quindon's like a godson of mine. I helped raise him, and to watch him and Casey do that and to be there. John, I can tell you, man, I'm still smiling about it, bro. I'm just be honest with you. I really am. Love it.
Well, you guys got to repeat.
Yes, sir. We're back. We're going nowhere.
We're excited. I'm excited to get to watch Casey and Oklahoma this season. I know you are as well. And we really appreciate your time and thank you for joining us. It's been cool to get to see things from your perspective over the years and how you got to where you are now. And we're looking forward again to seeing you on the DR7 circuit next season and get to see you try and defend that 18U championship. So thanks so much for joining us. Jonathan, I don't know if you have anything you want to say, but I definitely enjoyed talking with you and get to know you.
Coaches, definitely thank you. It's been an honor to get closer. You and I, connecting even deeper. Right. I know we got some more conversations to talk about 2025. Right. So, I just want to tell you that from the bottom of my heart, I got great respect for what you guys have done. in with your organization, but also where you be able to raise. I know you got 3 kids, but definitely 2 elite athletes out of those 3. I'm not sure about your other son, your other one, but that's a compliment to you as a man, to take things head on. And so from one man to another man, I want to tell you, I respect that, because it's a lot of people that goes through struggles in life and they quit because they let somebody else tell their story for them. And you say, look, we're still right. Me and God still right. And today, and I know you're successful in your career because you're still taking those same disciplines and dedication and being dedicated to those little bitty details.
Well, listen, I'm all about, the commitment to help others, to be sort of a beacon for what to do and what not to do because of my life experiences. I've lived it through my sons, to my own self, and try to give that information and my knowledge to my own kids. I do that to kids around here. I respect you because I know that's what you're about. And so, man, I applaud what you guys are doing with this podcast, and I appreciate the time coming on. I'll say this before I end. Listen, I've got 3 sons, Kendall, Casey, and Cade. All of them are good athletes. Cade was a great athlete through college. Through high school, had other aspirations, had 12 D1 offers, but decided to want to do something different. But here's what I'm most proud of. 2 things. I'm the only starting quarterback ever in the history of the University of Oklahoma that was allowed to be a punt returner also. Number 2, as a family, I'm one of the only people that have now had a father and 2 sons that will play quarterback for the University of Oklahoma. We call it the OU Thompson trifecta. And to see Casey at home now wearing the number 16, 1 for the number that his brother wore, and number 6 for the number I wore. And that's why he's going to wear number 16. So to see Thompson 16 on the back of the jersey this year in any capacity is, once again, one of those dream come trues. So I appreciate you guys having me on and wish you guys the best of luck on this moving forward.